Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for inviting me here to Madrid. My name is Chiara Ronchini, and I am the Energy Efficiency Manager with Edinburgh World Heritage. I've been very fortunate to work in many different World Heritage cities around the globe, always working towards making them more sustainable, always strive to be more energy efficient and sustainable. They all been very different. They all presented different challenges. For instance, this is Bukhara in Uzbekistan. It's a city which is mainly built in adobe, rammed earth, mud bricks. It's very interesting. However, it sits in a country with a transition economy, and obviously the challenges they are deriving from this. This is Cairo in Egypt. Here, the difficulty was to ensure that everybody was made aware of their wonderful heritage they have at their doorsteps. For instance, there's a very complex network of stakeholders here, complex from the social perspective and very complex community pool as well. So the key here was the engagement, participatory processes to ensure that everybody agrees on a vision, and this vision is actually undertaken and put in place on the ground. This is very much the same challenge we have in Edinburgh, actually, where I've been working for the past 5 years, where I would like to focus my presentation today. This is Edinburgh. It's been inscribed as a World Heritage Site in 1995 because of its outstanding universal value, and this is a concept which is common to all World Heritage Sites. It's something that makes the site, the city, unique. And in Edinburgh, its uniqueness resides in its contrast, its striking juxtaposition between the old and the new town. The old town with its medieval layout, very organic. It's a spine that basically cuts across the castle from the top of the hill to down the ridge to Holyrood Palace. This is very much in contrast with the neoclassical new town, which is instead very much chessboard-like structure, not only very different from an architectural and urban planning point of view, but also because of the school of thought that it embodies. The new town, in fact, is the place of birth of the Scottish Enlightenment, which was then disseminated and exported all around the world. It's a special place, but has many constraints. Well, this is the boundary of the site. You can see on the north side, you can see the new town, and the south side, the organic medieval old town. We have a second layer of complication. We have 7 conservation areas incorporated within the boundaries of the site, and they define special character areas with different regulations and planning constraints. We have many listed buildings which are statutorily protected. We have the highest percentage of listed building apart from London in the UK. And obviously, this also reflects a particular constraints in terms of planning and restrictions. We don't have a buffer zone. This is something that World Heritage cities usually have out with the boundaries of the site. We have instead, as a system of protection, we have a key view policy, which actually helps preserve key views and skyline across the city, and that works through view cones. And obviously, when you have so many constraints, it's really difficult to alter buildings and make any changes to the historic fabric. These are all tools that are meant to protect the historic fabric and the outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Site in Edinburgh. So we talked about how interesting and a special place Edinburgh is, But what you don't see from this pretty picture is what lies beneath. This is the fuel poverty map of Edinburgh, and in black you have the boundary of the World Heritage Site. In red, the Old Town in the south of the city is really highlighted in red, bright red. That means it's a hotspot for fuel poverty. And fuel poverty occurs when, and as you may know, when over 10% of the household income is spent in fuel bills. This means basically that the Old Town is not less energy efficient than the New Town, which looks a bit more greener at the top. It just means that there's a different type of population, more transient, that can't actually afford to pay their bills, whilst in the New Town, buildings are probably as energy inefficient. We have, unfortunately, we have actually a much wealthier population, therefore they can actually pay their bills, and that's why it looks much greener. When you have so many constraints from the planning perspective and also so many constraints from the fuel poverty side of things, we also have very high government targets for reduction of carbon emissions to achieve, and that makes it even more challenging when you have so many constraints. 42% reduction carbon emission by 2020, 80% by 2050. But we need to work and ensure that fuel poverty is reduced, tackling a very difficult and very hard to treat, as they say, housing stock. 45% of the buildings in Edinburgh are tenemental. This compares to a 20% of Scotland overall. 45% of the buildings are tenemental. That means they are in multiple ownership and multiple occupancy. That obviously makes it really challenging to get everybody to agree on a scheme when you have so many owners in the building. 30% of the buildings are pre-1919, and these are considered to be by the most as hard to treat buildings. This compares to a 20% of Scotland average. As I said before, 75% of the buildings in Edinburgh are listed, so are protected, and this is the highest percentage in the UK, apart from London. This compares to a 25% of the Scottish average. Some of the buildings look like the previous ones, these two on the left-hand side. They are Georgian or Victorian buildings, but some of the buildings, 4% of the buildings look like this one here, medieval building, very thick stone wall, very small window, completely different construction from this one. 4% of the buildings in the World Heritage Site, which are listed, are post-war listed buildings. We had an example before from a previous presentation. These are buildings which were definitely not designed to be energy efficient, and this is what we need to work on. I've chosen this photo because I really like it. The photo exemplifies best the environmental movement. So it's the Earth from outer space, and this is really a call for action. It's about trying to this is what is essential. It's about to get everybody to agree on a vision in order to carry out things on the ground, and that's what we've been trying to do in Edinburgh. Exactly the same, try to create the political support in order to deliver real projects. In Edinburgh World Heritage, my organization has been trying to do this for 40 years, and it's been working. It's a small charity, so it's a small non-governmental organization. And it's been working in 3 strands of work in charge of the management of the World Heritage Site, working on promotion and education, trying to engender a sense of custodianship of the site and raise awareness of the heritage that we have in Edinburgh, but also run a conservation funding program, which gives grants out to conserve, repair, and enhance the historic fabric in Edinburgh. But we also work, and this is the most important, in my view, area, on the influence in the monitoring of the site, and particularly drafting of a document, which is the World Heritage Site Management Plan, that I would like to talk about a bit more in depth just now. The World Heritage Site Management Plan, it's a requirement by UNESCO. and it needs to be adopted by the World Heritage City in order to make the most of its heritage, protecting its outstanding universal value. But in itself, it's just a piece of paper. It's just a document. What is important is actually the process behind the drafting, behind the creation of this document. In Edinburgh, we ensured that everybody's view was incorporated in the plan in order to agree on a vision, which is a mutual vision based on shared values and shared actions. We had a very long consultation process, which lasted about 2 years, which included not only the main stakeholders, but also professionals, obviously the communities, local communities, but also experts and professionals from abroad, in order to have a very all-encompassing view of heritage and what we wanted the city to be and what the vision should be. And this was essential. It's an essential process. It's very complicated. It's very long and tiring process, but it's essential in order to have a document which has any value, which actually can be translated into direct action on the ground. For the first time as well, this is our second management plan, and this was published in 2011 and will be valid until 2016. And for the first time in this second management plan, the concepts of energy efficiency, sustainability, and climate change were introduced. We are introduced with clear objectives, as I said, that with actual clear actions that can be undertaken and carried out by stakeholders, but also a clear monitoring system to ensure that these actions are implemented and with indicators which are measurable in order to understand and ensure that everything, all the targets have been achieved, as you can see here. Governance is essential. As I said, it's a process. So there's nothing, it's not a point in time. The management plan, it's a working document that changes all the time, and it's adapted as the city adapts, as the city changes as well. We have a World Heritage Site steering group, which is composed of 3 main stakeholders bodies. My organization, Edinburgh World Heritage, which is an independent charity, as I said, the City of Edinburgh Council, the local authority, and Historic Scotland, the government agency looking after monuments and sites overall, in Scotland overall. And the making and the managing of the site is it's a revolving system, it's a cycle. It starts from management plan, and which translates into the action plan and action program with clear actions and objectives. And it's always reviewed constantly through the monitoring report, which defines clear indicators and measurable targets that have to be achieved. This is all very important because without this process, we would have not been able to actually deliver any projects, because all the partners agree on a plan, on a vision, and we therefore can actually deliver some real projects on energy efficiency in the historic environment on the ground. And I apologize for this slide because I see it's very complicated, but this is just to demonstrate where, in red, the World Heritage Site Steering Group sits in a very complex system, and how also we draw on the experience and wealth of expertise from abroad through the ICOMOS and UNESCO and the Organization of World Heritage Cities, experiences and people, but also how the work of World Heritage Site Steering Group translates into working groups and actual action. And this is where, of the special working groups, where the energy efficiency working group sits. Of this very complex system that the management plan is, of this really long process, what I'm really glad about is that what was picked up by the press was actually just the climate change side of things, because they saw it as a very innovative and strange thing to put in a management plan, I guess. But even the more interesting thing was that what they really picked up was the message, which is exactly the message we wanted to convey. The aim of the project is actually of this idea of the energy efficiency in historic buildings is to demonstrate that very simple measures can help, something can be done, they can help to alleviate fuel poverty without detracting from the authenticity and the special character of the historic city. So we were really happy that this was the final message. Despite all the work that's been done, that was what the press really was drawn to. And as I said before, these historic buildings, traditional buildings, listed buildings are considered to be by the most as hard-to-treat properties. And I really dislike this term. I think it's very negative. I think it focuses on the negative side of things. What we've been focusing with my organization is the positive. What can actually be done to improve the buildings' energy efficiency, reduce fuel poverty, and reduce fuel bills as well. We start from the concept that traditional buildings are actually inherently very sustainable because of the traditional materials, locally sourced, they've been used, and they stood also for 200 years, and that means they're obviously inherently very sustainable. The solid stone walls have really good thermal properties, thermal mass, for instance. We have other interesting features such as passive system, natural ventilation, historic crown glass, which is actually has very good reflective properties. What we don't want when we deal with historic buildings is a waste, a lot of distraction of good, sound historic fabric. What we want instead a balance between energy efficiency and heritage conservation as well. Every building is different, particularly traditional buildings. They are unique, so it's very hard to generalize. But I've tried to do so. So we have two groups. For instance, we have detached houses. They perform thermally very differently from tenement flats. Although on the left, we have traditional detached houses. They can look like this. This is a medieval, actually, one. But this is a Georgian one. Very large windows. Obviously, there will be the weak spot in the building. Instead, this one, it's a medieval detached house. Very small windows. But probably here, the weakness would be the roof. In traditional tenement flats, this is a very standard Edinburgh tenement. Very large windows, again, probably Georgian, Victorian time. But we talked about this before. This is a post-war listed building, totally different. This is probably designed to have a design life of about 50 years. Definitely not designed to be energy efficient. Designed when energy was actually unmetered. So we have very different challenges, very difficult as well challenges. What we're trying to do in my organization, trying to demonstrate that things can be done and really make an impact, a positive impact on the reduction of carbon emissions as well as reduction of fuel poverty in the city, tackling the building holistically, but also at the city level itself. We have collated this wealth of information in best practice guidance, and I have brought some copies and I placed them outside. I've seen they're all gone, so, but you're very welcome to download it from our website, and if you're interested in more copies, I can even post them to you if you're interested. But this is exactly what we're trying to do, trying to ensure, disseminate best practice so that owners they would actually know how to maintain the building properly and also how to install very simple energy efficiency measures to make a difference. We also run workshops, energy efficiency workshops, to teach people how to install insulation, to draft-proof, or to reinstate original features which are excellent energy efficiency features such as historic wooden shutters. This program is funded by the government through a program called the Climate Challenge Fund, but we also work on international scale to disseminate best practice, and we are part of an excellent initiative called REN for Us. It's renewable energy for UNESCO sites and biospheres. And it's, as I said, a UNESCO initiative which aims to collect best practice case studies from all over the world, from World Heritage Sites and biospheres in order to create a pool of expertise and experience and to demonstrate that actually things can be done and World Heritage cities can lead the way really towards a sustainable future. I really recommend you to go on the Rainforest website. It's really a good platform and good resource. I would like to introduce you to a couple of projects that we carried out on the ground to demonstrate that, to show you that without the political support created through the process of the management plan, we wouldn't have been able otherwise to create and to deliver anything on the ground. This was essential, as demonstrated by these projects, which really embody the marriage between energy efficiency and heritage conservation at its best. This is Gilmore's Close project. It's a listed building, protected building in the heart of Edinburgh's Old Town in the World Heritage Site. This is how it looked like in 2006. The buildings were vacant, and the shop fronts, as you can see, completely neglected on the ground floor. The project aimed to created 17 new flats for vulnerable young people. And the shop fronts were completely revamped, and this is the main facade onto a very prominent position, a prominent location onto the Grass Market, which is a very central square in the city. This is the main facade, which was tackled and addressed with a thorough facade protection scheme with stone repointing, chimney repairs, enhancement and reinstatement of original features. We also took the opportunity to install very basic energy efficiency measures here. Secondary glazing was added here and insulation as well. However, in the back, at the rear, which wasn't subject to such strict planning constraints, the architects were able to be much freer and transform the building completely. Sun spaces were added for passive solar gain. A ground source heat pump as well was added, and that provides heating for all the 17 flats, and this is the pump room, which is at the rear of the building. The difficulty here was the planning, obviously, issue. We had to get this drilling machine through the very small arch on the left-hand side here. That was really tricky, but we managed to do so, and we were able to drill 17 70-meter deep boreholes down the ground. And that's how it works, the ground source heat pump. The boreholes, the heat is transformed in the plant room and transferred to all the 17 flats through underfloor heating. This is instead how the sun spaces work for passive solar gain. This is a bit of a counterintuitive measure because the sun spaces work much better when the two layers of glass are closed, and that means that the air can actually warm up much more quickly and then be transferred passively to all the flats. This is quite a complex topic or thing to grab and grasp from the residents there, because as I said, the residents are vulnerable young people. It's a very transient population as well. They stay in the building for maybe 6 months and then are relocated, reinserted in a different social environment afterwards. So what we found difficult is that the building wasn't used as intended. And we ran a thermal imaging study, and that was obviously confirmed. People kept the windows open and obviously completely defeating the point of these very fine and fancy measures. But this is something that happens very often when you deal with energy efficiency. Sometimes the very important thing is actually to work on a behavior changing program and teach the users of the building how to make the best and the most of the use of the building and to ensure that the building is used as it was intended. So we are working now on the post-occupancy evaluation, ensuring that best practice and is maintained and knowledge is maintained inside the building, which is very difficult when people are actually moving so often. Another project, which I'm sure my friend here, Nick, is going to talk a little bit more about this later, but this is energy heritage and renewable heritage projects. This projects, I think the innovation here resides in the possibility to actually overcome strict planning constraints and not only ensure that a wide range of energy efficiency measures are installed on the building, but also micro-renewables as well. Here we have a roof shape of this type. It's an M-shaped type roof, a Valligato roof is called, and that ensures that the solar panels can be fitted within the M of the roof, and therefore the solar panels are not visible, are completely concealed from street level. In this way, we were able to overcome the planning constraints, and every solar panel is connected to every single flat and provides for solar hot water. But as I said, I would really like to stress the fact that here we didn't incur in any loss of historic fabric. On the contrary, we took the opportunity to fix slip slates or to restore bits of the building which were not in good order, but also reinstate original features, such as the historic wooden shutters, which are not only a very heritage-friendly measure, but also a very effective energy efficiency measures. Yes, 2 minutes? Oh, very quickly. Okay, this is the hardest to treat property because it's a multiple ownership and multiple occupancy building. Very quickly, here we applied a very best practice, looking at the conservation statement and how to look at the significance of the building. The conservation statement is an essential document because it really defines where the areas of the building which are important. And we were able to assess every single energy efficiency measure against this criteria of significance. So where the measures would be more, where would they be more appropriate, where they wouldn't be, where alteration can be actually possible. We were able in this way to identify specific measures that would be appropriate for this building, not only from the energy efficiency point of view, but also from the heritage point of view. Even photovoltaics and CHP, combined heat and power as well, would be actually appropriate on this building. Very quickly, we are not looking just at the space, not just at the buildings, but also the space between the buildings. We are looking both at LED lighting as well as long life induction lamps. And they are very different. LED lighting is more appropriate where you have art installation or where you need really high level of lighting when there's not so historic the approach, whilst if you want to retrofit an original historic light fitting, or you want to have a replica, that's where long life induction lamps are better. They're much more diffusive, they can be dimmed, and from an energy efficiency point of view, they're quite comparable because they have a lifespan of 15 years. To conclude, really, this is just an international perspective. This is something that was devised by a group of experts, drawing on the experience of the UNESCO School of Sustainable Energy in Southeast Europe. This school was initiated by the UNESCO office in Venice, as well as UNDP Croatia, in order to train professionals, experts, and local authorities in the sustainable management of World Heritage sites, in order to mainstream energy efficiency in the management of the site. It works on a very simple principles, defining the best practice methodology, best practice governance, starting from a vision, shared vision, engaging all the stakeholders, what I've been saying before, capacity building and educating in order to ensure that everybody's got the skills and the tools to implement projects on the ground and also monitor the achievements as well. This has been published as well on the energy efficiency and energy management in cultural heritage guidance by UNDP Croatia and UNESCO, and you're very welcome to look on the website and download it. I really hope that this very brief introduction to Edinburgh was of inspiration for all the cities sitting here today, and I would really like to share with yourself our experience, but also get to know yourself and get to know a bit more about your experience on this wonderful occasion of the International Conference on Energy Efficiency in Historic Buildings in Madrid. Thank you very much.